Hi, it's Anna Mason, and in this watercolour tip video, I wanted to show you how I achieved the lifelike texture to this realistic hand holding a brush. I usually paint botanical or wildlife subjects, but my painting technique can work equally well when painting people, especially when painting in lots of detail like with this hand. As usual, I worked from a photograph so I could see all the detail and have the lighting totally fixed. I created a pencil outline of the hand, including the major wrinkles and fingernails. The first stage of the painting was to build up the tonal range within the hand. I started with a super pale wash, which was a match to the lightest highlights within the skin. Using my brown paint with masses of water, I applied the mix everywhere in the hand. Then once that was dry, I applied a layer that was just a little darker, with some yellow in with the brown, covering everywhere except for the lightest tone highlights, and also leaving the fingernails, which were a slightly different colour. Then I painted the lightest colours within the brush too. With my method, the next stage is to go in with the very darkest tones within the subject. With this hand, that requires some bravery, as the darkest tones are relatively really dark in some of the creases. It looks like I've taken the mix way too dark, but that's just because we're seeing it next to the lightest tones we've already painted. By painting the darkest tones straight away and matching that colour as best I can, it makes it easier to paint the darker midtones, which are the shadow areas that connect up with the darkest creases. I used a brown and pink combination here, a little more watery than my darkest tone mix. Again, it looks really dark compared to the lightest tones, but trust me, it will look right once I work on the midtones. In fact, as the mix dried, I could see it wasn't quite dark enough in some places to connect up properly with the darkest tones I'd painted before. So I apply another layer to a few areas. Next, I use a brown, yellow and pink mix at a more watery consistency to work my way up the tonal range into the mid-midtones. I overlap into the darker midtones I'd painted before to create smoother transitions there. I then adjusted the mix to add more yellow to work into other parts of the midtones, before switching down to a smaller brush to work around the fingernails. Again, I applied another layer to those areas I thought needed darkening once the paint had dried off, as watercolour so often dries a little lighter than it appears when wet. Next, I used a really watery and quite orange coloured mix to work on the lighter midtones and to smooth any transitions into the mid-midtones too. As I compared my painting with the photo, and because of the way that tone is relative, I could see that as it dried, far from being too dark in the darkest tones, now the midtones were painted, the darkest tones needed darkening even more. So then I in turn adjusted the darker midtones with another layer to them to bring them back in balance. And then I did the same with the mid-midtones, also making sure that I began to add a little more detail with my brush at this stage. Then, in turn, darkening the mid-midtones revealed to me that I could again darken the lighter midtones a fraction with my paler and more yellow mix. After painting in and therefore darkening the fingernails on the black brush, I could yet again see that I needed to darken up my darkest tones again, and then work through the darker, mid and lighter midtones in order to get the hand back in balance. Once I was happy with how it was looking tonally, I used my smallest brush to paint in extra detail to the hand, making sure the paint underneath was dry so the markings were kept crisp. This had the effect of darkening the hand overall, so yet again I had to darken up my darkest tones even more. Would you have predicted that back at the start? Hopefully you can see that going in with the darkest tones really early on was super helpful to this process. If I had simply worked on the midtones to begin with by layering up watery mixes, I would have really struggled to get the darkest tones as dark as they should be for realism, because I'd have had nothing dark on the paper to compare them to. A full video class of this hand is available now in my online school. If you've enjoyed this tip video, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I'd love it if you'd share this video with your friends. And if you'd like to take one of my tried and tested video classes for free, come on over to annamasonart.com, where you'll find even more resources to help you pick up your brush and paint the way you've always wanted to. Remember, you won't improve your painting unless you make the time to paint, so be sure to schedule in some me time this week and paint something you love. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon with another tip for creating watercolours with wow. Hands are great, aren't they?